So I'm very sorry. My voice is slowly vanishing. Got a cold overnight. I'm very sorry. I tried my best. So this talk is about. Yeah. This talk is about CairoSDPR, Cairo-based system-dependent renderer, and the motivation for it is pretty simple: render faster. So we already had some tries to render faster, and the idea is, of course, not new. So up to now, primitives get rendered by a pixel processor. So all the primitive technology stuff is about describing geometry and throwing it at a renderer, and the renderer is more or less a special, thank you, special version of a primitive processor. So that's the background. So up to now, the primitives are rendered by something called VCL pixel processor, and it uses output device in the background and VCL to render stuff. And so this ends up at the backends we have, and if we are on Linux and it's activated, it ends up in the Cairo backup. And the idea with primitives, excuse me. It's very sorry. I try slower, maybe. So the idea always was to render using a base processor, and rendering it using a pixel processor was always an in-between step, and it was always planned to do renderers which are system dependent and can use the fastest available graphic system on the system where we could do implementation. But this was in principle cut off by the layoff with the office story, and we all stopped doing stuff, so I never could finish that. So the idea is pretty old, and now I had the chance to do that. So CairoSDPR stands for Cairo System Dependent Primitive Renderer, and I already made a prototype for Windows last year, and you can find the presentation in the web. And this one is called Direct2D Pixel Processor 2D, and it was just a prototype to show that it's doable. And I used Direct2D because we don't had it yet, and I wanted to try out how adaptable this idea is just to modern graphic backend. So it worked pretty well, but it stayed a prototype. I had not the resources to do to get this to product quality. So ECL Pixel Processor 2D was just a prototype, and it was used now for 13, 14 years, which was never the plan. So since it uses output device, it can, of course, render to all backends, and this was exactly the idea, to have this in-between state. But it cannot be optimal because the backends and VCL API and the output device API is much too tight and integer-based and does not support the necessary stuff to render directly and to use more modern graphic systems more directly. So, plus?
Can't you expand it, like with expanding the API?
There were a lot of tries to expand it. The problem is, if you make a little expansion, you have to expand all the backends and everything. and the meta file and all users of the meta file. It's an incredible amount of work to do a small change in this area. So that's exactly the reason for the primitive architecture, which avoids all that stuff. It makes it much easier. So I had now the chance to do that after a long time, thanks to Collabora and Michael, who sponsored it. Thanks. And Quaylen started in principle and made an early experiment cloning this prototype, which I did for Direct2D. And he adapted it roughly to Cairo, and I based my development directly on it, taking over and trying to get it to product quality as fast as possible. You can grab the Git logs for CairoSDPR : I like to flag my stuff like that, and you can check the commits which were necessary. And the renderer itself is isolated in mainly one file, mainly because there is some tooling shared with pixel processor from the Direct2D pixel processor. So there's some common tooling for pixel processor development. Not very much yet, but it's getting more and more could be isolated. But the main reason is indeed not to have a big file, but to have just one file, which is system dependent. So theoretically, this is the only file which would need to be linked against Cairo if we wouldn't have other Cairo usages. So maybe in the future we get to something like that, but that's not sure. We have to discuss how to continue. So for other similar renderers, similar complexity can be expected. So this is also an experiment, how far we can get with this idea. So it has now reached product quality and is activated in master for some weeks, maybe 2 or 3. Who has recognized that? Who had problems? Who had seen something? Okay. So up to now, 3 regressions were reported, all fixed already, but that's it. Nothing else, no crashes, no catastrophes. So it's much more safe to make a big change like this with primitive and primitive renderer, because just the structure of the primitive renderer and the quality of the graphic description allows a much better implementation structure and much more safety in the graphics stack if you do it this way. By the way, all of the 3 regressions were incredibly valuable because all 3 were leading me to small stuff I had not really solved well in this renderer, and all 3 were leading to better partial solutions in this renderer. So if you find a bug, don't hesitate, file it, and use this meta bug number you see to do that. So feedback is really essential for quality, and I think when you continue like that, we will have a very good quality for the release with this Cairo backend. So to make clear, activated in master means draw impress is completely painted now with this renderer, and in writer and calc it's draw objects and bitmap stuff and little bit more, and the overlay and UI interaction stuff like that. So this could have led really to problems, but it's stable, and no one really complained up to now. So to show the achieved differences, I made a demo collection, and behind demo collection you have a link, and you can start with the README. Wait, not yet. Okay. One more. Where are we now? Yeah, just wanted to talk about this one. Yeah. So set up for the test, I just used 2 identical pro versions of LibreOffice, running on the same machine, so using the same Cairo, same hardware, exactly the same version. So everything is identical except that one is using the Cairo VCL backend and the other the new CairoSDPR. So to make it comparable and to make it visually comparable, I use black theme on the old stuff and white theme on the new stuff. And now I think we can just show. It's not numerical testing stuff. I talk about that later. Let's see. How do I? Which one? So this is the most easy one, most simple one. It's just using a filled polygon and with some text. And the start is to copy it from the demo file. And so black is the old version. Do some copies. Use Shift F3 to make more copies. Get to some 1,000. Then copy paste that stuff over to the version with CairoSDPR, which is the LibreOffice. And then just play around with it. So zooming and scrolling, for example. So this is the zoom in the VCL backend, and this is the zoom in the CairoSDPR. And this is just with a filled polygon, and filled polygon was already optimized in the VCL backend. And the only difference, and this makes this test interesting, the only difference is the setup of the Cairo rendering and the VCL output device stack not being used. So that makes it very interesting, and it's already faster. Can we close then? And back to the presentation now. Yeah. Okay. So you have seen how the test runs. Showing the animation is much easier. This was just some 1,536 objects. So we have two classes of achievements, faster but not multiple times. You saw that in the last example. But we have also multiple times faster. So the next example show you how to get multiple times faster. Can we get that again? I don't know the Mac. Warte. All God, all trans. Let's go. Let's go. This one. Yeah. So this uses a class of objects which are typical, for example, for Microsoft import, because you have linear gradient, linear transparency compared with transparency and gradient combined exactly in the way Microsoft Office would do it when you import it. Is it running? Yeah. So those cases were simply not well renderable with, which one is that? Okay, let it run. This one, yeah. So what the new renderer can do is just combine stuff like that much easier, and using the primitives we already have. So that was also always the target with the primitives. Do not need to render, for example, alpha channel and the content in different phases, but in the same phase. So now again, black VCL backend create some copies. So white CairoSDPR, and now again playing around with it. So black VCL backend, that's what we had until now, and white what we have now. So, and also scrolling, old scrolling, new scrolling, just by render speed. And remember, same machine, same Office version, same Cairo, but using a primitive renderer. So that was always the idea. Thank you. Yeah, again, sorry for my voice. So you've seen this is multiple times faster. And as I said, oops, it's now automatically running. So you have seen the single color, and because why it is already very interesting. And you have seen the RGBR gradient direct rendering with the CairoSDPR, same system, same hardware. So other achievements, when you follow the link, you get a test file with all possible combinations of text and fill styles we have, and you can just copy paste it to an Office if you want to try it out yourself. Because it's activated in the master, you can just use this environment variable to switch it off to get back to the VCL backend, and you can just compare identical Pro versions. So I would use the Pro versions, because the non-Pro versions with debug, the difference is even greater. There's much more difference in the debug version, probably because there's more debug code in this whole stuff of VCL. I'm not sure what the problem was, but you have seen the difference, and I think we have achieved a good amount of progress, and I hope we can do more of that in the future. So all examples from the test file can be combined, of course, also with shadow and other stuff, which I did not even show. And I'm not aware of a single case where CairoSDPR is not faster. Even the highly optimized stuff, which was already optimized in the VCL backends, but the problem was what the VCL backend got on data. So this optimization always was limited to what you can do. I did not really talk about fat line drawing, but it's also very, very fast. And luckily, Cairo is doing pretty much the same line tessellation for fat lines that we do in the primitive decompose. So we don't need to use primitive decompose in this environment at all. And CairoSDPR can directly render a fat line in any combinations you can think of. Works very well. So the decompose is still necessary, because don't forget, we still need VCL at output device, for example, as base for PDF export, which is very sad. But there it has to be sometimes decomposed. It always depends. But the problem with metafile is it's a paint recording and not really a graphical description. So I say it like that to make clear that the quality of the graphical description of a metafile is just not comparable with what you get with the primitives, what you could render. So even that is still much faster. So I thought about measuring numbers, but it wouldn't make much sense from my point of view. If someone really wants it, we can do it, but you just see the difference when you play around with the Office. So results would anyway depend on used hardware, used LibreOffice version, used Cairo. So would be only comparable if you also do all of that on one system on the same version. So it's much easier to just compare visually in this case. So It's not only faster, but there are quite some cases where the quality is also better. So for gradients, because we don't need to decompose them anymore and can paint them directly with CairoSDPR. You don't have steps in the gradients anymore. They are just painted like Cairo can paint them. So this is fixed, for example. For pattern fill, the edges of the tiles are much smoother aligned to each other, and there's also no more limit on how small a tile can get. We had some problems with that when the tiles got very small. Of course, you can get hundred thousands of tiles you have to paint, and this can really hit your neck when you're rendering the office. If you have not a system like in Cairo where you can just say what it should render. So for SVG, I could directly support SVG gradients. So we are importing them and they have a decompose. And up to now, we had to use the decompose everywhere. But this was not easy because these SVG gradients have some wild transformations. And at the time I wrote the SVG import, I had to invest a lot of time into these transformations because SVG transformations can be based on two different coordinate system base points for gradients, dependent on to which object they are attached to. But now this work has paid out because I could, in principle, directly use these transformations which I created at SVG import. What was that, 10 years ago? Could directly use them. So they get directly rendered now. And for text is pretty much the same. Text was already highly optimized in the VCL Cairo stuff, thanks to Quaylen. And I could more or less directly reuse the method in VCL for text rendering. So this guarantees same quality and at least same speed. For the same reason as the simple example you have seen, this is also a little bit faster because it has not go through the 4 or 5 layers of VCL. So there's still stuff in the CairoSDPR render which can be improved. We will see whatever we can do. It's not sure how to continue. Close soft edge shadow blur is not directly supported currently because Cairo does not support it, but we could support it with other libraries and prepare this as bitmap for Cairo, whatever. We could get the direct-to-D renderer for Windows to product quality. We could find someone who does the same for Mac because it's done now. There's a good example what has to be done, and everyone can just copy-paste it and do a renderer for a graphic system on Mac, for example. We will see what comes up. If there should be different SDPRs in the future, one other interesting point is there's no reason to not change SDPR during Office runtime. You don't need to restart the Office. In principle, you can choose for every rendering what SDPR you use. And what I forgot to write down here, of course, you can do SDPRs not only for the 2D backends. We could do SDPR also for the 3D stack and start to support hardware 3D renderers on different systems. So the 3D stack is also completely done in primitives. So lots of possibilities. Michael was speaking about a skier backend. That's not really wrong because a good point would be we would have one SDPR which runs on all systems. But I have to say I have not too good experiences with skier, so I'm skeptical. I think better way would be to get something very stable on all 3 main platforms and directions and then start to redirect the output device rendering maybe to source renderers, because when we have them and they are stable, we can slowly start to get rid of output device rendering. So, lot of possibilities. Just for info, how much time do I have? 5 minutes. Okay. One of my last changes, just this idea came to me. We have this convert to bitmap X. This is very central. A lot of stuff is using it. For example, also this glow stuff, preparation rendering is using convert to bitmap X to prepare this glow corona for objects. It's used in many places. It's used from Uno API. It's used in many exports. Convert to bitmap X is very central, and I can do that now directly for the CairoSDPR renderer, because I just made 2 small extensions. One is create pixel processor 2D from scratch, which is implemented for Cairo, and the other is extract bitmap X from base processor 2D, which is also implemented for Cairo. So I just made a second constructor to the CairoSDPR, which creates a Cairo surface and directly renders RGBA. So this is much faster. The old version is also correct, but needed to render in those cases the content and alpha separately. And this is gone now for CairoSDPR and also activated in master. So we could do some questions, or I could show you the animation which shows the faster SVG rendering.
Folder again.
Yeah. Wait. One moment, please.
I'll show you. I have them all downloaded here. So.
Yes, the SVG one.
Last one. Last one, yeah?
Yeah.
Let's just open it in VLC. Everything works in VLC.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you can ask me while it's running. So yes, that's one of my favorite SVG examples. It's very, very complex. So black office, old office. White office, new office. Direct support of SVG gradients. Yeah, so this is recorded with spinning the mouse wheel while holding the control key. I think you all know this interaction. So then I dared to copy it a little bit. So what is 17 times or something? So new office, you can still zoom in. Old office. Okay. Give it some time. Yeah, trying to set a zoom factor directly because it didn't react anymore. You know that? Okay, questions?
So you think the metaphile reduction of this thing really wrecks the semantics
Yes.
and makes it hard to re-render it?
Yes.
As I understand it, you render to metaphiles for presentations.
No.
Okay.
No.
The
The presentation is another story. There's an extra renderer for presentation, and we should urgently change it to primitives too, because with the SDPR renderers, we could highly improve presentations too. It's currently not the case. The problem with the meta file, you see, meta file means someone found out that it's not enough to program against output device API, but that the graphic description would be needed, and it's recorded, but it's a recording of a pane and does not have the necessary quality to render it somewhere else. It can be done, and unfortunately, it's our base still up to today, for example, for PDF export, all on integer, lot of stuff, converted to bitmap data. So this would also be a very good candidate for the future to change to a primitive renderer. But the problem is the PDF export is bombarded with hacks and small fixes, and all of those would have to be rescued when we change that. It will be a very hard task. Questions?
Probably first you need to separate the PDF export. And then
We have to make it to a primitive renderer. That's the only clean way.
yeah, but I mean, we had first all these PDF export things that are just PDF exporting related to, and then
Yeah, think about the PDF XOut dev data. With primitives, you could just embed it to the primitives where it belongs to, where you need it. Yeah. I was not involved in all of the stuff which was developed at that time. I was fighting for getting better. Okay, thanks.